Good morning and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all well. Hope you've all had a nice rest and you've enjoyed going back to work. One of the advantages of being retired is you don't have to get up in the morning. So, last video, thanks for the comments. Mostly all good. Well, one or two obscure, won't call them won't say they're negative because I appreciate all the comments, but one or two obscure ones, and I will be doing a video soon on just answering some of those obscure stroke negative comments. But anyway, the last video, as you're probably aware, was based on the advantages stroke benefits of living on a narrowboat as a senior. So I thought on this one we will do the disadvantages of living on a narrowboat, because as I said, it's not always sunshine and roses. There are some disadvantages, but not necessarily, as far as I'm concerned, that bad. You can turn disadvantages into advantages. So let's have a look at what I think are the disadvantages. And again, other YouTubers do videos on advantages, disadvantages, benefits and so on. So it'd be worth comparing what they see as advantages, disadvantages to what I class as advantages, disadvantages. And I've got them written down on a post-it note so I don't forget. So I'm going to try and do this whole video in one go without having to edit in and out bits. So let's see how successful we are. And using this new gimbal that I got given at Christmas. So let's see if that makes any difference. I must remember to look at the camera, which is on this side, and not look that way. So it looks like I'm looking at you and not looking away. So first thing are basically what I class as the physical challenges. As a senior, we all get older from the day we're born basically. But there are some physical challenges to living on a narrowboat. One of them being getting on and off. And I did mention that on my tour video. 36-foot narrowboat with quite low well deck and quite a low stern end. So not very hard for me to get on and off my boat. But other boats, different designs, may find it harder to get on and off. So getting on and off a boat can be quite physically challenging, particularly during the winter time like now. Had a frosty morning this morning, so the side of the boat was a little bit slippery, so you have to be aware of things like that. Other physical challenges are basically when you moor up, you have to get on and off the boat, pull the boat into the side, so actually pulling the boat with the centre line is quite physically demanding, particularly if there's a strong wind like there was last time in the last video I made. I had to go inside. Started recording it on the back deck, moving, but it got so windy that the boat was being blown to one side. So if you've got a wind blowing the boat as you're trying to moor it up, that can be quite hard to actually keep hold of it and pull it in as you're trying to moor up. Also, physical demands of moving stuff on and off the boat. When you go shopping, you need to be mindful of where you are, where your car's parked if you've got a car, or where the boat's moored. There are some supermarkets actually on the canal. If you go down towards Aylesbury, there's a Tesco's right on the canal. Leighton Buzzard, there's a Tesco's on the canal. If you go down towards Hemel Hempstead, I think there's a Sainsbury's on the canal. Is it Sainsbury's or Tesco's? Not sure. But there are some supermarkets actually on the canal, so that's easy. But the physical demands of carrying stuff to and from the boat, I always use the working boat to supply me with coal and logs if I need them, because that way I don't have to then carry them from wherever I get them from. I do buy the occasional bag and logs and coal from Aldi because it's cheaper. They are a bit smaller, easier to carry, but it's the physical demands of moving stuff to and from the boat, and obviously as a senior needs taken into consideration. A lot of seniors, a lot of people, not even just seniors, a lot of people buy trolleys. I've got a little two-wheel trolley, like a little cart, which I use to carry stuff. And some people do buy like a four-wheel little cart that you throw stuff in. and that does help, but it does need considering. Also emptying the Elsan. I've got an Elsan cassette, so when they're full, they're quite heavy, so you need to obviously manhandle them on and off the boat to the Elsan point, to the car if there's not got an Elsan point nearby. So again, you need to consider how you're going to be moving stuff in and out of the boat and to and from the boat. Mental demands, not just physical demands, but mental demands. Mental awareness, you can be a disadvantage if you live on your own. One of the advantages of living on your own is you don't have to consider other people. You do what you want when you want. You move around the boat, move the boat where you want, when you want. Moving around inside the boat, 36-foot boat, quite small inside, as you saw from the boat tour. So if there's two of you, obviously moving around can be a bit restrictive. But your mental awareness when you're on your own can be lonely at times. I don't mind being on my own. I like my own company. I do have family local, so I do get to see those. But if you're a very sociable type person, and as I said in the advantages, the boating community is a very good community. But a disadvantage of living on your own is it can become lonely at times, particularly during the winter. We get long, cold, dark nights, basically from 4 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the morning. If you are a social type person, you might not like the loneliness. So your mental state can be affected. So that can be a disadvantage. But like I said in the advantages, is the boating community are very good. I've just walked down the canal chatting to a man I'd never met before. He's a boater. He just moved into the area that I'm moored at. He was just walking back. We've just walked about 1.5 miles down the canal together, chatting about boats. Never met him before. He's gone back to collect his car from where he was moored. But that's the boating community. You just mention you're a boater, and if they're a boater, you end up talking boats, basically. So like the old days in the army, pull up a sandbag and we'll tell you a story. So just be aware that your mental health, your mental awareness can be affected, can be a disadvantage, particularly if you're a very sociable type person. Maintenance, maintaining your boat, can be a disadvantage, particularly if you're a senior and on your own. Bigger your boat, more maintenance there is. I did a video not so long ago about blacking the boat. Quite a very strenuous task, particularly on your own, particularly at the beginning when you've got to get rid of all the old muck from before and then putting the new bitumen paint onto it. So the maintenance of a boat can be quite arduous, particularly as a senior. So you need to take that into consideration. But also things like engine maintenance, which you need to do once a year. That can be quite a strenuous thing. The space in a narrowboat for an engine is quite restricted, and particularly if it's quite hot and sunny. I maintained my boat once. I think it was the first year I did it in the summer, and just changing the engine oil and changing the diesel filters in a small restricted space when it's hot can be demanding. So that can be a disadvantage. Like I mentioned, your cassette toilet, getting rid of that, emptying that out, that can be strenuous. Another disadvantage is obviously because we're living on water, is the boat can rust, and they do rust, and it will rust. Even if you've got a brand new one, it will eventually start rusting. They get knocked around as you go in and out of locks, so you do need to maintain them. So disadvantage of owning a narrowboat is they do become knocked around a little bit. And I had a comment on the advantages one from a lady that said about that she'd like to consider moving on to a boat, but one of the things that puts her off is that whenever she watches people's videos like mine, they always tend to be breaking down. There always tends to be something. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, that can be a disadvantage because they do break down. Like anything in life that's mechanical, it will have some kind of problem at some stage. All I would say was the newer the boat that you buy, the less chance of having any major problems. And they're not necessarily major problems. Like I said, I broke down once. I had water in my diesel, which obviously you can get. I call it diesel bug. And if that gets through to the engine, it stops the engine from working. So I had to go to an engineer, They basically flushed out the diesel, cleaned the diesel, put it back in, it worked okay. So that does happen. Other things, people's engines break down, but if it's an old engine and it doesn't get maintained, it will break down. Your car engine will break down if you don't maintain it. Your washing machine will break down. It's just the nature of mechanical things, they do break down. But don't let mechanical things put you off this lifestyle. It will happen. Minor things is that there's always, you talk to boaters and they always say there's always something to do on a boat, and they're right, there is always something to do. I've got a couple of minor jobs that need doing on my boat. I just changed the Chinese diesel heater just recently because the one I had wasn't working properly, so it cost me £100 to get a new one off of Amazon. Came within a day, just swapped it over for the other one, working perfectly now. So but there is always someone on the canal. There's always someone local. People earn money from doing maintenance to other people's boats. So there's always somebody to talk to, always somebody to help. So don't let the maintenance of a narrowboat put you off, okay? But it can be a disadvantage, particularly if you're a senior. Excuse the sniffles, but that leads me nicely on to the next subject, the cold and the damp. Narrowboats are cold in the winter and they're hot in the summer. They're cold because you're on water. They're cold because you're out in the open, you're out in nature, which I love anyway, it's an advantage. And they're cold because you get the damp off the river, off the canal, the ambient temperature. So they can be damp all the time if you haven't got very good ventilation. Now luckily my boat's got good ventilation. I was mindful that when I put the plastic on the windows in preparation for winter, which I did in my preparation video, is that I've left 2 of the windows uncovered so they can be opened and closed. But there's ventilation on the doors, and you do have to have a good ventilation on your boat. It's part of the requirements for your boat safety certificate. You have to have ventilation front and rear because you're carrying your own gas and that, so they need to be vented and so on and so on. So if you haven't got good ventilation, then it will cause damp. Now, touch wood, luckily I've never had any damp or mould on my boat, but I do know others. Boat Time, Wes and Amy, the YouTubers, one of their videos last year, I think, they noticed they had white mould spores underneath their bed because the area under their bed wasn't very well ventilated. They ended up buying some of those things that collect the water. I'm not sure what they are. They're basically a little pot that you put like crystals in. It helps collect the damp and the water. And they ended up having to clean the mould off. I think use some kind of bleachy solution. It can be a problem. Obviously, if it gets on your clothes and gets on your bedding and so on, it can cause a problem. So a disadvantage of being a boater, living in a narrowboat, can be the cold and the damp. The thing about the cold though, one of the advantages is that you are aware that it is cold. So you do something about it, as you can see for today, quite a cold day today. So I'm wearing winter clothing. And the old saying, there's no such thing as bad weather, it's just bad clothing. When you're a boater, that can be true. Just make sure you've got some decent clothes to wear when it is cold, particularly outside. And on the boat, obviously to get rid of the cold is you have good heating. So I've got a log burner, which I only use when it's really, really cold. Like today, because I think it's -2 today here. I will be using the log burner at some stage today. But I've got a Chinese air diesel heater, which blows out hot air across the whole of the boat. And that keeps the boat nice and toasty. So it can be cold. A house can be cold if you haven't got very good central heating systems. I used to live in an old council house in Welwyn Garden City when I was born and bred. Didn't have central heating, had a fire in the front room. I always remember as a kid waking up in the morning in the winter. It was always cold until you went downstairs and mum and dad lit the fire. You all sat round the fire. Mum always used to say, don't put your feet too near the fire or you'll get chilblains. So all those older ones of us that remember chilblains and open fires in the living room, you know what I'm talking about. So cold and damp, it can be cold, can be damp, but you always try and do something about it. The next one, access to healthcare. Now, I did cover this in, I think I covered it in the moving on to a boat, didn't I, video a while ago. Healthcare can be a disadvantage, particularly if you are elderly and particularly if you have got ailments. I mentioned in my last video that the only thing I ever really suffered from was chest infections. I do have aches and pains from age-related things, rugby injuries from playing in the army, and so on and so on. So I do get the odd twinge in my back, which is just looked after by paracetamol and ibuprofen and not carrying heavy weights. But I did used to suffer every twice a year with chest infections, really bad hacking cough that could only be looked after by antibiotics. Haven't had it for 18 months, coming up 2 years now. I had it once in the 3 years I've been living on the boat. So I put living down on the boat to improving my health, both mentally and physically. But if you do suffer from ailments, then you do need to consider your health care, particularly your doctors, where are they located, prescriptions, where are you going to get them from. But again, I did mention in a previous video that the NHS system in the UK, and if you're not from outside, if you're not from the UK and from outside, we do have a very good NHS system. We all moan about it because it takes hours to get to see a doctor, it takes days and days to get an appointment, so on and so on. But it all comes part of your working life. When you work in the UK, you pay towards the NHS, and when you get older, most of it becomes free. Seeing a doctor is free. It's just trying to get to see one. Excuse me sticking the notes in my mouth. I'm just trying to change the gimbal into my hand. So yeah, so we do have a very good system, although, you know, we do moan about it. But that's the British way, isn't it? I think we tend to moan about most things. I do anyway. So an old grumpy git. And to the lady that did mention in one of my first videos that I seem like a nice guy on the outside, well, I am. I'm just an old grumpy old git. I'm ex-army and I'm ex-police, and I think that after 30 years of service, I'm entitled to be grumpy. I'm entitled to be an old git. So yeah, so thanks for that comment. So yeah, access to healthcare can be a disadvantage, needs considering, particularly if you're on medication and that. But like I say, being out in nature, you know, being out today, I don't know how much of this you can see, but just being out today, it's a sunny day, it's crisp, it's cold, the sun's shining, so I'm getting my vitamin D. You know, would you rather be out here or be sat in a house with the radiators roaring, with loose women on the telly, or would you rather be out in nature? I think there's something about being out in nature, isn't there, that does help your health, you know, particularly your mental health. I think just being out in the open, even just for an hour, just getting out for a walk, helps your mental state, doesn't it? So I find it helps mine anyway. So I can't speak for everybody, I can only speak for myself. But just be aware that a disadvantage can be access to healthcare. I've put limited access to services can be a disadvantage. Now what I mean by that, and I'm just going to turn the page over so I can see what I put on my notes, is as a continual cruiser, is I don't actually have access to services every day. If I want to get water, if I want to empty my Elsan, I have to go to a Canal and River Trust CRT service point. I've just come from one at Marsworth. I did the video about what Marsworth was like. So that's a service point. So as a continual cruiser, a disadvantage is access to services. If you're in a marina or you've got a mooring at the side of the river or canal, sometimes side moorings you can get an electrical hookup and a water hookup. You do, in most marinas that I know of, get an electrical hookup and water hookup. So they're hookups to services. So, but obviously you have to pay a premium price to be in a marina, and I've covered that in previous videos. So access to services can be a disadvantage, and all you have to do really is just be good at planning. An advantage of being a continual cruiser is you have to pre-plan. Where am I going to be going? Where's the next water point? Where's the next service point to empty the Elsan, get rid of your rubbish, and so on. So it may be a disadvantage, but you can turn it into an advantage, because if I'm running out of water and I need to get some, it means I have to move. And the advantage of being a continual cruiser is I get to be in a different location. So I can go wherever I want, when I want. So don't let that put you off. I mentioned continual cruising just there, and one of the disadvantages of being a continual cruiser, particularly during the summertime, not so bad at the moment during winter time, because there aren't as many boats moving around, is the lack of spaces during the summertime, particularly around the London area. I cruise between Milton Keynes and Tring on the Grand Union, and between Leighton Buzzard and Aylesbury Bowl, and in the winter time there are plenty of mooring spaces available on that stretch. If you go further down past Hemel Hempstead, past Watford on the Grand Union down towards London, the closer you get to London, the lack of spaces there are. It becomes very noticeable that on the towpath side, which you've got to moor on, is the closer you get to London, the less spaces there are. So the lack of spaces as a continual cruiser can be frustrating, can be a disadvantage. But an advantage is if there isn't a space, you just move a little bit further. Disadvantage with that is if you've got a car, that can be a disadvantage. I've put that on the list. Having a car can be a disadvantage, because you obviously have to then go back and get it. The gentleman that I was talking to just a little while ago, we just walked 1.5 miles. He's just walked back to get his car. I moved my boat earlier in the week, had to walk 2 miles to go back and get the car. But is that a disadvantage? No, not really. The advantage is I've got a car to do my shopping, got an advantage of having a car to go and see my relatives, to look after my grandson, go and visit my mother twice a week or whatever, and get my shopping. The disadvantage is you've got to consider where you're parking it, how far you've got to walk back to get it. If you don't like walking, get a push bike. I've got 2 push bikes, one of them's electric. Hardly use it, but on days when I'm not feeling energetic or whatever, and I need to go and get the car, just jump on the e-bike and go 2-3 miles back to get it, throw it in the back, drive and park the car up to the new position. So advantage, disadvantage, whichever way you see it. Weather extremes. We are now in first week in January, just coming to an end of the first week, 5th of January. And the weather in the UK, very hit and miss at the moment. 1 minute it's sunny like it is today where I am. Another day it's overcast. The week before this, over Christmas, where in this area, was quite foggy, very low fog. Wasn't that cold, 3-4 degrees, not compared to what it is now. We're in the minuses at the moment. Talk about snow somewhere. I think there's snow up north at the moment. Flooding in some areas, breaches of canals in others. Feel sorry for those guys. If you keep in touch with YouTube and narrowboating, you might have seen that one of the canals up north has breached. In other words, the bank has burst and all the water's drained out, so the boats there are stranded. That's going to take months and months to repair, so I feel sorry for those guys. And if you are one of those guys, I hope you're well. I hope you're safe. I hope your boat's safe, and I hope that they get it sorted soon so that you can get your boat. Basically what happens if the water drains out, your boat ends up on the bottom of the canal, and if you're on an angle and you're a liverboard, you've then got to consider what you're going to do. So good luck to you guys if you are one of those poor people that are stranded on the canal. Can't remember the name of the canal. I'll have to have a look and I'll just write it on the bottom here what it is. So yeah, weather extremes. So I mentioned before, it's cold in the winter and it's hot in the summer. It's a metal box. Good insulation helps, but no matter how much insulation you got, it will get cold. It's metal. If it's minus outside, it'll be minus inside at some stage. So good heating. In the summer, metal box, no matter how many doors you leave open, no matter how many windows you leave open, it will get hot inside. But that's not a disadvantage, is it? Because it means you don't sit inside, you sit outside on the side of the canal, chat to people, sit out with a nice cold beer, have a barbecue. So it can be a disadvantage if you don't like weather. If you live in the UK, you should be used to it. You could say that today is a British summer day with that sunshine, but it isn't, it's winter. So you have to get used to, and it can be a disadvantage as a senior. If you don't like the cold, then you have to really consider it, and you have to make sure you've got the right equipment to doing it. The thing with the summer as well is, I did mention it on my tour video, I've got a portable air conditioning unit. It does drain the electric, so I need to be mindful of that. But it's good because it actually cools the whole of the boat down. Turn it on, you can set it to minus whatever. It blows cold air onto you, cools the boat right down. But I only do that if I've got to actually stay inside the boat, and that sun is bright and low, but it's beautiful. So I'm not complaining. Just another thing to be aware of, weather conditions, particularly in the UK, and I know it's happening at the moment in some places across the UK, is flooding. You may think, well, you live on a boat, you live on the river, you live on the canal, so how does that affect flooding? Well, the thing is with flooding is that if there is flooding locally and the canals fill up with the water, they can overflow the banks, and the draft on a canal boat is only about 2 foot, 2'6", 3 foot, so you've only got about 3 foot of boat underneath the water. So if the bank is quite low and the canal does start flooding and the water comes over the side, I have seen it, and I've seen other boats. Cruising Alba, which used to have a YouTube video channel. I think they've given up YouTubing now. They're based down Somerset, no, not Somerset Avon way, down Bristol way, down towards Bristol and Bath, Kennet and Avon Canal, I think and on the River Thames they used to go. And they put a couple of videos out during the winter, a couple of times. Cruising Alba, to show you what it's like to be on a river, the River Thames I think they were on, and they had to put pilings in the side, metal pilings, I think they were scaffold poles, put in the side to stop them from actually being taken out of the water by the flooding. So yeah, so you need to be mindful of flooding. And if you know the area you're going to be in is going to start flooding, then obviously move out of that area. So that can be a disadvantage. But then again, moving, that's an advantage to me. Wildlife. I put the wildlife on here because they can be a disadvantage at times. Particularly first thing in the morning, during the springtime, when they're in mating mood, being woke up by geese fighting over wanting to mate. Is very noisy. If you live near any geese, or people that live on farms that farm geese, how do they do that? I don't know. It's very, very noisy. So they can be very noisy. Swans, mating season, the male swan, very defensive of his area. I've seen videos and I've heard stories from other boaters about your boat got attacked by a swan as it went by. The swan pecking at the boat as it went by, defending its area. And the dogs, Beryl and Bunty, they're out with me at the moment. There are no swans on here, but in the past I've had male swans come up to them and hissing at them by the side of the canal. They haven't necessarily jumped out of the water and chased them down, but they flap their wings. They can be quite dangerous things, swans, so they can be a disadvantage. I've heard stories from other boaters about having mice on their boat. Luckily I've not had that yet, but I can imagine having a mouse or a family of mice actually inside your boat can be quite daunting. So that needs considering, can be a disadvantage. But also the extremes of wildlife in the summertime, particularly the mosquitoes. I'm quite lucky in the area that I'm on at the moment. We don't seem to be very infested with mosquitoes, but now I've said that, probably this summer I'm going to probably regret saying that. And I don't like mosquitoes because they do tend to like me, and I do tend to get bitten quite badly. When I lived in Spain, I was always putting mosquito repellent on me, always burning citronella candles to try and ward them off, but they still got through to me. And I hate mosquito bites. I'm terrible with them. I can't stop scratching them and they end up in bloody sores and everything. So yeah, so mosquitoes can be a disadvantage. Any midges during the summertime. Wintertime, don't tend to get many problems with wildlife. There is an advantage of being out in nature, and the wildlife is having them. Just walk past a gaggle of ducks. You obviously can't see them because I've got the camera this way round. but just watching the ducks on the water, watching the birds. I'm looking forward to the springtime. One of the things I love about being out in nature in the springtime, particularly around about March, April, when it starts getting lighter in the mornings, is waking up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, listening to the bird song. That's an advantage. So yes, so wildlife can be a disadvantage. Now I think I know one more. I just got one more that I put down. Adapting to the slower pace. If you're somebody that doesn't like going slowly, then living on a narrowboat is not for you. Narrowboats do not go fast. They do get one or two that go past you what seems fast, but they're only doing about a maximum of 4 miles an hour. And it can be annoying. I had it this morning when I was getting ready to come out with the dogs. A boat went by. The etiquette is that you slow down for other boaters, particularly boats that are moored, because there's nothing worse, a disadvantage of when you're moored up and you've got a boat that goes past fast as your boat starts banging against the side of the canal, and it can knock the paint off if you're up against metal pilings or concrete standings. So it doesn't help. That's a disadvantage to you, because obviously it can damage your boat. So if you're a boater, you should know better. Please slow down when you're going past moored boats, particularly with boats that have got people living on them. And it's obvious they're living on them because you can see the smoke coming out the chimney in the winter. You can see the doors open. So remember the etiquette of slowing down near moored boats, please. So yes, the slow pace of life, if you're not used to it, can be a disadvantage. To me, there's no point in rushing. I'm retired. I don't want to get anywhere fast, because the sooner I get there, the sooner I have to leave. Take your time. It's, it's designed to be slow for a reason. So enjoy it. No need to go fast. But a disadvantage of smaller spaces is and I think this can be an advantage. I mentioned it in the other video, and that the advantage of living in a small space is you don't have lots of clutter. So a disadvantage can be if you're used to having lots of things around you, if you like your gadgets, if you're a chef or a baker and you like your mixers and your air fryers and all those things I mentioned before, you can have them on a boat, but you have to be mindful of how much energy they use, how much space they take up. 36-foot narrowboat, not a lot of space, so you have to use the space wisely. If you like your space, then particularly as a senior, if you're wheelchair bound, then I know there are boats that can be adapted for wheelchairs, things with lifts and ramps on them, wider doors and so on. But of course, obviously, it's something that you would need to consider. I live on a 36-foot narrowboat on my own with 2 dogs. Sometimes it becomes a bit of annoying when you're trying to move down the boat and the dogs are in the way, but that's not really a disadvantage, is it? Advantage of living with 2 dogs on your own is an advantage to me. But you need to consider the space you've got. If there's 2 of you, if you're on a narrowboat, the bed tends to be 4 foot wide. They're what they call a small double. So if you're used to having a king size bed, you're used to your space in bed, that may be an issue for you. If you're disabled, getting on and off the boat could be an issue. Moving around inside could be an issue. But they're not really disadvantages. You make the most of the space you've got. You buy things that you can have storage in them. My sofa underneath has got storage underneath it, storage underneath the bed. I built a storage box at the front that acts as a step to get on and off. I've got a little storage cupboard in the bathroom that acts as a wardrobe as well. But obviously I just don't have the amount of possessions that I had when I lived in a house over 3 years ago. So small areas, small spaces needs considering and can be a disadvantage. Okay, so that's what I see as the disadvantages. Not bad ones really. Our ways and means around it. Same with anything in life. If you've got the ways and the means to do things, then it can be done. Got a wide beam coming past me now. I don't know if I can turn. I don't know if you can see him. He's just coming into view now. There he is. That's a wide beam coming by twice the width of a narrowboat, but you can see he's going nice and slow, he's not in any rush. So yeah, so like I say, have a look at other YouTubers, see what their disadvantages are, and if it's the lifestyle you consider, then go for it. Or to say go for it. If you don't try it, you'll never know. So thanks for watching. I hope you have a good week, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. If you haven't already done so, then please consider subscribing, liking the video, and put any comments at the bottom, and I always will answer comments, whether they're negative or positive. I will answer them. So take care, have a good week, and I'll see you soon. Oh, but